There is this very specific, very universal kind of panic that sets in when your parents call and ask, "How are things?" And almost automatically, before you even check in with your own brain, you say, "Everything's fine."
Right. It's the reflex. You could be on fire, your career could be imploding, but you say, "I'm fine, work is great, eating plenty of vegetables."
Exactly. And today we are looking at a film that takes that reflex and essentially weaponizes it. We are discussing the 2009 drama Everybody's Fine, directed by Kirk Jones and starring Robert De Niro. This is a listener request that came with a really touching personal note about the pressure to protect our parents from our own messy realities.
It is a heavy one, Jake. On the surface, it looks like this warm holiday road trip movie. You know, De Niro traveling cross-country to surprise his adult kids. But underneath, it is actually a surprisingly brutal examination of the lies we tell to keep the peace. It's about the cost of excellence and the gap between who we are and who our parents wanted us to be.
Let's start with this setup, because the context here is vital. De Niro plays Frank Good. He's a widower, recently retired, and his defining characteristic, professionally speaking, is that he spent his life making the PVC coating for telephone wires. Literally, his job was to protect the thing that lets people communicate.
Which is the central irony of the film, right? He spent 40 years ensuring other people could talk across distances, but he has absolutely no idea how to talk to the people sitting at his own dinner table. The film kicks off when all 4 of his adult children cancel on him for a planned reunion, and instead of sulking, Frank decides to go against his doctor's orders and take a train and bus trip to visit them, one by one. Surprise inspections.
And that is where the tension begins, because, as our listener pointed out, these kids aren't just busy, they are hiding things. Big things. But before we get to the specific lies, Rachel, I want to talk about the era this film came out in, 2009. It's interesting to see De Niro in this role because this isn't Taxi Driver De Niro. This isn't Goodfellas.
No, this is deeply into his patriarch in Twilight phase. It's important to note that Everybody's Fine is actually a remake of a 1990 Italian film by Giuseppe Tornatore called Stanno Tutti Bene, which starred Marcello Mastroianni. In the original, the father is a bit more operatic, maybe a bit more delusional, but De Niro's Frank is quiet. He's stoic. He's that classic American dad who showed love by providing, not by emoting. Critics at the time, like Michael Medved, who gave it a fairly lukewarm review, called it bleak and depressive. It didn't do well at the box office, bringing in only about $16 million worldwide against a $21 million budget. But over time, it's found this second life as a therapeutic film, exactly as our listener described.
I think that's because it hits a nerve that critics might have missed in 2009. The listener mentioned this specific line that Frank's wife used to say, "If you love someone, tell them something that will make them happy." That is a terrifying philosophy if you really unpack it.
It is a recipe for isolation disguised as love. The listener noted that this runs in their family too. The fear of upsetting a mother who is aging or not in good health. In the film, the mother was the switchboard. She filtered the hard truths. She took the kids' failures and polished them up before passing them on to Frank. Now that she's gone, Frank is getting the raw data for the first time, and he doesn't know how to process it.
Let's break down the kids, because each one represents a different kind of disappointment that Frank has to face. First, he visits David in New York, but David isn't there. Then he goes to see Amy, played by Kate Beckinsale. She's a high-powered ad exec. House looks like a magazine spread. Husband, kid, the works.
Right, the success child. But the cracks show up immediately. The husband is cold, the son seems distant, and we eventually learn that her marriage has fallen apart, and she's essentially staging a play for Frank's benefit. She literally sets the table for a dinner that isn't going to happen. This is the performance of wellness.
Then he moves on to Robert, played by Sam Rockwell. Now, this was the one that hit me the hardest. Frank thinks Robert is a conductor for a major orchestra. He's been bragging about it to everyone.
But he's not the conductor. He's the percussionist. He hits the big bass drum. And there is this excruciating scene where Frank watches the rehearsal, waiting for his son to lead the orchestra, and realizes he's just a guy in the back keeping the beat. Now, to be clear, being a professional percussionist in a symphony is a massive achievement. But in the context of Frank's pressure, this relentless push for them to be exceptional, it feels like a failure to Robert. So he lied. He inflated his title to buy his father's pride.
That is the key, isn't it? The listener mentioned that Frank constantly encouraged them to succeed, but encouragement can curdle into pressure very easily. If your parent only praises the conductor, you're never going to tell them you're happy playing the drum.
Exactly. Psychologists often talk about this dynamic where adult children lie not to protect themselves, but to manage their parents' emotions. It's a form of caretaking. There was a study by Nanyang Technological University a few years back that looked at parenting by lying, how parents lie to kids to get them to behave, and found a correlation with those kids growing up to lie to their parents. It creates a culture of dishonesty. In Everybody's Fine, the kids aren't lying because they are bad people. They are lying because they love Frank, and they assume Frank is too fragile or too rigid to handle the truth.
And then we have Rosie, played by Drew Barrymore in Las Vegas. She's supposed to be this big dancer, but she's actually barely scraping by. She has a child that Frank doesn't know about, and she's in a relationship with a woman, which she's also hiding. She is hiding her entire identity.
Rosie's situation is the culmination of Frank's failure to listen. She tells him, towards the end, "We didn't tell you things because we were afraid to upset you." That is the dagger. The listener mentioned being moved to tears by the revelation about the fourth sibling, David. We should tread carefully on spoilers, but we have to discuss David because he is the ghost in the machine here.
We have to. David is the artist, the one Frank was perhaps hardest on or most worried about. Throughout the film, Frank is trying to deliver a painting to him, but he never finds him. It turns out David has died from an overdose, alone, while Frank was on this trip. The silence from David isn't busyness, it's death. And the siblings knew. They kept it from Frank to protect him.
This brings us to the most controversial part of the film. Is that protection justified? The listener says, "My brother, sister, and I are afraid of upsetting our mother, so we keep quiet." In the movie, that silence denies Frank the chance to help David, or at least to know him before the end. When Frank finally learns the truth, he has a heart attack. The lie didn't save him. It just delayed the pain and added betrayal on top of it.
It's a powerful argument for radical honesty, but I want to push back a little, playing devil's advocate. Is there a grace in the lie? The film ends with a somewhat reconciling tone. Frank visits his wife's grave and says, "Everybody's fine." It's almost like he's adopting the lie now, but as a form of acceptance rather than denial.
That's the nuance. The ending is where the film diverges from the 1990 original. In the Italian version, the ending is much more cynical. The family remains fundamentally broken. In this American version, we get that Hollywood redemption. We see the family gathering for Christmas. Frank accepts Rosie's sexuality and her child. He accepts Robert's career. But I think the listener is right. The reconciliation feels a bit earned, but perhaps too tidy. The damage of 30 years of high-pressure parenting doesn't vanish just because you had one sad road trip.
The technical filmmaking here does a lot of heavy lifting to sell that emotion. Did you notice the sound design during the transitions? The telephone wires buzzing? It's this constant hum of anxiety.
Yes, and the Paul McCartney song, "A Want to Come Home," which was nominated for a Golden Globe. Kirk Jones, the director, actually screened the film for McCartney, who was so moved by De Niro's character that he wrote the song specifically for the movie. It captures that specific ache of a parent realizing they are on the outside looking in. The lyrics are all about the distance between the story we tell and the reality we live.
I want to go back to the listener's point about Frank saying he'd be proud of them even if they were house painters. The listener felt that was something that should have been said in childhood, not as a consolation prize in old age. That really struck me.
It is a profound observation. When a parent says, late in life, I just want you to be happy, it can sometimes feel like a betrayal of the previous 20 years where they said, I want you to be the best. It leaves the child thinking, wait, I killed myself to be the conductor because I thought that's what you needed. And now you're telling me the drum was enough? It changes the rules of the game after the game has already been played.
Right, it makes the struggle feel retroactive. Frank was a wire maker. He coated the wires to protect them from the elements. He thought he was doing the same with his kids, coating them in this armor of excellence so the world couldn't hurt them. But the armor was too heavy. It crushed them.
And the coating prevented them from connecting. That's the tragedy. But I agree with the listener that it is a therapeutic film because it allows us to forgive Frank. De Niro plays him with such vulnerability. He's not a tyrant. He's just a guy who didn't know any better. He thought love looked like pressure. Watching him learn that love actually looks like listening, that is cathartic.
There's a scene where Frank asks Rosie, "Why didn't you tell me?" And she says, "Because we wanted to make you proud." That cycle, lie to please, please to avoid shame, is so hard to break. The film suggests that the only way to break it is for the parent to put down the expectations first. The kids can't stop lying until the parent stops demanding perfection.
Absolutely. And for anyone listening who is currently in that I'm fine loop with their parents, this film is a gentle nudge. It says, the truth might break their heart for a minute, but the lie breaks the relationship forever. You can't be close to someone who doesn't know who you actually are.
Well said. Everybody's Fine might not be a cinematic masterpiece in the traditional sense. It's sentimental, it's a bit soft around the edges, but as a mirror for family dynamics, it is incredibly sharp. It reminds us that fine is often the enemy of real.
And that, maybe, just maybe, it's okay to tell your dad you're just the drummer.
Thanks for the request. This was a really moving one to revisit. We'll see you next time.